All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Um, just want to talk a little bit about um, domestic violence. And so we want to give people a few moments to get on to join us. Want to talk a few minutes about domestic violence. Um, so if you can create a watch party, if you can invite others to join to hear about domestic violence during this COVID-19. I think it's very important to note that Chadra and I had a conversation about
Mhm.
2 weeks ago
Right.
to talk about domestic violence. And domestic violence has increased dramatically over this COVID stay at home order by so many governors across the United States of America. And so we want you to join us today for our conversation on domestic violence and the numbers and how they are rising during COVID-19 or during the coronavirus pandemic, however you want to call it. So please invite somebody else to get on with us. And as you all remember, some of you may remember, some of you may not. Chadra is my cousin from Virginia. Well, she's from New York, but she's in Virginia.
Thank you.
And you got to give props to New York. But she is in Virginia. And so, we have a kindred spirit, and I just love talking with her. She is such a sharp individual. She
Mhm.
has an anthropology major and degree, I should say. And she works as an activist, does so many things. Some of you were very interested in the Sankofa project. And so at the end, we'll have her talk about that again for those people who might have missed it. But, Shadra does a plethora of things. She's very well rounded and she has a lot of gifts and talents to offer. So we're so glad to have the opportunity to talk with her again on today. And so, Shadra, as we begin to talk, I was reading the New York Times and I found something very interesting.
Mhm.
Instead of calling it domestic violence, people have found a more tolerable term, and that's called intimate
Yes.
terrorism. All right. So, did you
We
know
read,
that? Am
yes,
I
sis.
late?
Yes. Well, you know what's so funny? I absolutely am happy that we are doing this call. So thank you again, Bishop, cousin Allison, for coordinating this because it's important. And like you said, we did this discussion March 21st, actually, was
Yeah.
when we've had our first conversation. I am familiar with the term intimate terrorism, and I think it's more appropriate to call it that because that is exactly what it is. Domestic violence makes it seem like it can only happen in the house, like it's something within the confines, but
Mhm.
intimate terrorism really, I feel, brings into the different relationships that can happen. You don't have to be living with your person. Domestic makes it seem like you have to be in the house, but it could be a
Yes.
boyfriend, it could be a girlfriend, it could be someone that's living out of state that is stalking you on the phone. So, intimate terrorism, I absolutely agree. That article in the New York Times that you cite is brilliant. And the lady, one of Amanda Taub, who wrote the article,
Yes.
she interviewed Marianne Hester. I'm sure you're familiar with this. She's a Bristol University sociologist who talks
Mhm.
about domestic violence. And she said that it happens at any time when families are in close proximity,
Yes.
like
I
when
was
they're
going to talk
spending more
about that.
time
Go ahead.
together, right? Yeah, I mean, when I thought about that, I was like, wow, so we're thinking about this pandemic, but
Yes.
really holidays,
Yes.
Thanksgiving,
Christmas.
Christmas,
Yes.
Hanukkah, any occasions, summer vacations where people are in close proximity, those are
Right.
the times that domestic violence or intimate terrorism
Yes.
skyrockets
Yes.
because
Yes.
people have nowhere to go. They're stuck with their person or persons. So,
And
families
so
are on lockdown.
let me ask you this while we're right there, because that was
Sure.
one of the things I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it seems to me that when you're in close proximity, you can't run from those things you could usually avoid or
Right.
run from or not deal with. when you are
Right.
forced to be, I guess, in a stay-at-home order, and you're forced to not go to your job unless you're essential, and the kids also,
Right.
or children, are forced to be at home as well because all the schools are closed, then what do? There are only so many rooms that people can run to get away from each other.
Right.
And so I think that the numbers do increase when people are forced to spend time with each other versus
Right.
spending time staying at their job, because that's what people do. They stay at their job in order to avoid
Right.
going home. They go out to
Absolutely.
bars and clubs in order to avoid going
Right.
home. They go to all of these different places so that they won't have to go home and deal with what's at home. And so now
Right.
we don't have those outlets. I want to call them an outlet because that's what they are. We don't have those outlets. So now what do? You have to
Right.
face what is before you, that there may be some problems, there may be some challenges, there may be some
Right.
things where people have grown apart, because sometimes that's really a part of it.
Right.
Or there may be an abusive person who is very controlling, and now you have to be in their presence all the time. And so, talk
Absolutely.
about that some, because I think that's what some people are dealing with. They used to be able to leave, but now you
Right.
can't leave. And so that forces you to have to deal with that which you did not want to deal with, or may not
Yeah.
have been able to deal with. I don't want to say it that way.
No, 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 definitely. And I think, part of the issue with this, when the pandemic hit and the powers that be decided that one of the ways that we could hope to contain the pandemic or to lessen the infectious rate, right, by people being out and socializing, was to do this order that everyone needed to stay home. The problem with that is that while it was thinking in a very large scale about our public health, they
Mhm.
were not, the powers that be, once again, were not thinking in terms of our most vulnerable, right? We talked
Right.
about that before. The
Yeah.
vulnerable, we think about pandemics, and especially this one, which is respiratory, we think of, well, is largely respiratory, but has other issues with it. We think of the elderly, we think of people with pre-existing conditions. The population that often gets left out are women,
Yes.
right? Women get left out. So here you have this governmental order that everyone needs to stay home. They didn't take into consideration what that means for people who are living in situations where there is abuse and where there is violence. So what's been happening now, which I'm actually really excited about, the United Nations put
I
out.
saw.
You
Yes.
saw that, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
his quote was amazing. So I just want to read just a bit of it. It's from
Yes.
Antonio Guterres, who
Right.
is the Secretary General
Yes.
for the United Nations, and he says peace is not just the absence of war. Many women under lockdown for COVID-19 face violence where they should be the safest, which is in their home.
Right.
So he was saying that he appeals to the governments, that the governments now need to put women's safety first. So
Yes.
what that means is shelters need to be considered essential.
Yes.
There was a time where, the shelters were not considered essential. They shut everything down and they didn't want people in shelters because they were concerned about contamination and spreading the virus. But the reality is that for people who could potentially lose their lives, like we know women are doing,
Yes.
and in cases, some men, but the numbers are higher for women.
Yes.
Just globally, I'll say, um, from the United Nations, they say Spain has had 18% more calls in the first 2 weeks of this pandemic than it did last year. France is at a 30% national spike.
Yes.
Lebanon and Malaysia, the calls have doubled. China, it's tripled.
Yes.
So in all these places, you
Mhm.
know, like you're saying, people are on lockdown. They're in situations where they don't have any place to go. So I think the government is thinking, at least the United Nations is saying, that we need to think about the women and children that are at risk. And that means that we need to make sure that our governments are putting um, safe houses together, shelters together, so that when women are in dire situations that they can call, they could go to a facility and they can be safe. Because people are losing their lives. People are stressed. People are losing their jobs. And who do they take it out on? the
person at home.
people who they're home with, right?
Yes,
Right?
yes. I I found this to be very interesting because um, first I was glad to see that somebody did recognize that somebody needs to help the women. You know, because it's
Absolutely.
important that we look out for the women who are the high percentage of the victims. When we
Right.
talk about what do we call it? Intimate terrorism. Uh,
Intimate terrorism.
so yeah, I'm gonna get that before we get off. So I think that
Yeah.
it's great that somebody actually realized that women are important, and we have to make sure that there's some type of system in place to look
Right.
out for, as you said, the most vulnerable during this time, because the women and
Mhm.
the children are oftentimes the one who will be abused, because
Absolutely.
abusers, believe it or not, oftentimes don't just abuse the parent or the spouse, they abuse the child that's there as well. And so, it's kind of a ripple down
Hmm.
effect. And I was very
It
disturbed,
is.
Sandra, by reading in that same New York Times article that there was a woman who talked about, they didn't give her name, but she talked about
Right.
the man, the husband picking up. They had problems before, but they were working.
Right.
And so I guess the abuse was, probably minimized because they weren't always home. But now that
Right.
they're home, the
Right.
disagreements and disputes have increased. But when the husband
Right.
picked up the high chair and beat her with it, I was
Right.
very disturbed by that. And
Right.
so, I think in those type of situations, both people need to be talking to somebody, because he
Right.
needs to talk to somebody and receive some type of therapy for being an abuser. And, naturally, she would need some therapy because she is now being traumatized and probably
Absolutely.
experiencing anxiety and some other things because she's there all day wondering when is the next episode about to happen. And so, how did you feel when you read about that?
Absolutely.
Because I was very disturbed to read that particular abuse testimony in that particular article. Are you still there, Shadra?
Yeah, I was. I am. It froze for some reason. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I was absolutely horrified by that, because I always think in terms of, like you said, the trickle down effect. So you have a woman who is in a house with her partner, male or female, who's abusing her, in most cases, men. Um, and this is not speaking to the good men out there. There's plenty of good
Yeah.
men. So this is not to
Right.
you. This is to the ones who are abusing. So you have a woman who's in a situation where she's in a house, she's in close quarters, her children are there, her children are at risk. When I read that he beat her with a high chair,
Yes.
I'm always wondering, at what point did he love her?
Yes.
They have a family together, and at what point did it turn and
Yes.
he felt that he had a right to hit
Yes.
her? See, that's the issue for me, is that we are all globally dealing with this pandemic.
Yes.
Everyone is stressed. No one knows what the future is going to be, when we're going to be able to go out and actually talk and hug our loved ones. I mean, everyone is under pressure. So
Yes.
you have that, and then on top of that, you have situations where women are, so they're already stressed and living in fear,
Yes.
right? Because of this pandemic. And then you add on top of that being in your home and being stressed because the person who says that they love you is beating you,
Yes.
or could potentially kill you, or is threatening you and your children. I mean, it is just, like I said on the last call, we live in a culture of violence. We just do.
Mhm.
Violence is perpetuated, rape culture is perpetuated in the media. You look at advertisements, you see women in trunks, you see women in very disturbing scenarios, that look like rape or look like kind of like a gang violence with one woman and five men around her. All this images, it creates something, I think, in the mindset of people.
Yes.
And
I
it
believe.
creates this cultural belief system that women are somehow to be owned, to be objectified, to be controlled.
Yes.
And it infuriates me that women are living in terror and that children are scared living in their homes, because homes are supposed to feel safe. But you know, one thing too, Allison, the mental health you mentioned, suicide rates have skyrocketed because
Yeah.
of this.
Yes.
People are living in isolation and are at home, and
Yes.
they are just terrified, right? So you have people with depression, with PTSD, with all sorts of conditions now that are not able to get the services in the way they were able to get services because people are quarantined, right? So, you know, mental health is stressed right now. We talk about the people on the front line. I've always had a love and appreciation for doctors and nurses. I have. My son at birth was in a very scary situation and wound up going to a hospital at 10 days old. He was airlifted by a helicopter. I have always had such appreciation for the medical
Yes.
team, you know,
Yeah.
the medical field.
Mhm.
Despite the issues with Tuskegee and all of that, we'll leave that out for this conversation, but we can
Yes.
pick
For the
that up
moment.
again another
For the
time.
moment.
But for the moment, but yeah, so I have an appreciation for them. But the police and the mental health people are overwhelmed. They are overwhelmed. They're dealing with COVID, right?
Yeah.
They're dealing with people health wise, and then on top of that, they have to deal with domestic violence, or as we say, we learned today, right? Intimate
Intimate
terrorism.
terrorism.
Um,
Let
and
me
so
go back. Let me go
everybody's overwhelmed. Yeah.
They are. Let me go back because you said two things that I think were worth going back to. One is suicide numbers are up, and that's because a lot of people are being triggered. A lot
Right.
of people are being re-traumatized, and
Right.
like you said, a lot of people are isolated, and people it's difficult for people to deal with the unknown. And so, even
Right.
for people who don't have mental health disorders and who don't have challenges on a normal day, are experiencing some of this because of the unknown.
Yes.
In math, I got my bachelor's in engineering. We like to deal with
Hmm.
variables when you talk about dealing with an equation and solving something,
Yeah.
but we don't want that variable in our life where we don't know. You cannot fill in the
Yes.
number and complete the equation. And so nobody knows when this will be over. Nobody knows when they're going to have the vaccination. Nobody knows when they're going to be able to come out, of the houses. And so,
Right.
yeah, suicide numbers have gone way up. And so we encourage anybody who feels as if you think that you need some assistance and that there's nothing else for you, please call one of the hotline numbers. But when you talked about the domestic violence person being at home
Yeah.
and the children being there, I think oftentimes, this is what I want to go back to. Um, they're watching these videos that promote the woman as this item or this object
Right.
or some type of possession, and it's okay
Hmm.
to do certain things to the woman without her permission. And so,
Right.
all of that is promoted on the videos that the young people watch, is promoted on the games that they play on the PlayStation. All of those gaming systems is promoted on a lot of the channels that people are watching. And so they're seeing that in every way. And so I think they have become normalized with certain levels of violence. And so while we may say it's violent to do this, do that, some people think this is normal, this is their right because they played the games, they've watched the videos, they listened to the songs. And so now this is kind of their norm. And so
Right.
we have to work to get the message out that it is not the norm to abuse anybody.
Right.
It's not the norm to
Right.
um, try to control anybody else. One of it is a control issue. It's not the norm to try to take away someone else's freedom. And so
Right.
those are the type of things that we have to talk about because I believe, like you said, that's where the terrorism comes in. And
Right.
so, um, intimate partner violence, we know that that's in the LGBT community as well as in the heterosexual community. And so, I think the terrorism, like you said, is a better term for today because that is what is happening.
Absolutely.
And it causes a person to be in a place of fear at all times. And so during the COVID-19, you're dealing with enough, like we just said, you
Right.
already can't go out, you can't work, you aren't allowed to go to any of these outlets that you're accustomed to going to. And so now, hey, you've got a terrorist in your house.
Right.
So,
Right.
it is a real challenge to think about. So now the people are calling the hotline numbers. And Chadra,
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if I'm sure you've seen it, but they've said that the courts are being called with requests for all of these orders,
Yeah.
because now you have to get protective orders because of the abuse that is happening or increasing. There was a woman who died, I believe it was at the end of last week,
Yeah.
because her protective order expired. The I think he was an ex-husband or boyfriend, one of those, but he
Right.
came back over, I guess the day after it expired, and she had
Yeah.
requested, but the court was closed. She was trying to request them to give her another protection order, and the court was closed. And so therefore, he came back into her property and he killed her and the baby, because the order had expired. And so now
Yeah.
women are being forced to try to get these orders during a time where a lot of time the court systems are closed, people are not working, maybe there's one person working, you know.
Right.
And so what do we do in those types of situations?
Yeah. I mean, it's really daunting to think everything pretty much is shut down, right? So what do? If you are waiting for the courts to maybe give you an extension on a protective order and you're unable to get one. I mean, this is why I think what Guterres was saying about that we need to change the way we're thinking about the pandemic. We need to, we're saying that everyone should stay home, but we have to include within that the essential places that need to be open are shelters,
Yeah,
women's shelters, domestic violence shelters. Maybe aspects of the court system could stay open to handle cases where women are calling in or are needing assistance. I want to go back real quick just to give the number, because we like to give our phone numbers.
yes.
So I pulled up the suicide line. I didn't want
Okay.
to not give that. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, if anyone is feeling stressed or anxious or feeling like you're at the end of your rope, just know that there are people out there that love you and that care for you, and we want you to hold on to life.
Right.
And if you need to talk to somebody, the number is 1-800-273-8255. You can chat either via text, it looks like, or you can go onto the website. So that's the
800
National Suicide
273.
Prevention Hotline. Yes, Prevention Lifeline is it's 1-800-273-8255. And while we're on the phone numbers, let me give the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Again, that is 800-799-7233. Because these numbers are important for us to have. The thing about this intimate partner violence is that it's a step away from bullying. It's a form of bullying.
It is.
Right? So we don't tolerate bullying in school.
Yes.
We tell children that you're supposed to be kind, right? You're supposed to stay and respect people's personal space. And somehow you have, people who are in relationships who claim that they love each other. And as we said, domestic violence does not discriminate. So, because it's about power and domination and control. So you have just as many cases of same-sex violence as you do heterosexual violence. This, and in many cases, you have the LGBT community, especially trans women, who are the highest, trans women of color,
Right.
are the highest number of women who are killed when you're looking at the LGBT community. So, we have as I said, a problem in this culture over dealing with violence.
Yes.
And what we need to do when we have a chance to really like sort through all of this, we really need to get to the core, like you were saying about, the imagery, the videos, even magazines. I remember not that long ago, taking my sons to the bookstore, and the magazine section had, women who were, dressed, sitting on top of a motorcycle with barely any clothing on. And my children are preteens. I don't want them seeing that. One, because I have no problem with her choosing to do that. I don't police women. I feel like you should do whatever you want to do. But what I'm
Right.
saying is it's right there for children to see. So when children are growing up with images that show women in a particular
Absolutely.
way, when
Absolutely.
when the language of music is perpetuating violence towards women or calling women out of their name, it all builds up this narrative that women are not valued. And
Yes.
so when you don't value something, what do you do to it? If you don't teach your children, or if you don't have value over your expensive jacket, let's say, that you buy, right? You
Yeah.
don't come home and hang it up. You just throw it on the sofa. After time, it wears down. It doesn't look as good, right? So when
Exactly.
we don't value things, and when we don't value people, just like during slavery, just like during the Native American genocide, just like the Jewish Holocaust, just like the Trail of Tears, when you don't value people, these kinds of things happen. People need to be taught. Boys need to be taught
Yes.
that boys and girls are valued. I don't
Yes.
tolerate hitting, even with my children. I tell them that, and I have two sons, and when they're playing and one hits the other one and they're wrestling, doing what they do, I stop them midway when one says that he's had enough. And he says, no, 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 I don't want to play anymore. Because they need to know no means no. You don't put your hands on anyone. You respect
Yes.
people's personal space, and you don't have a right to inflict pain on anyone else. 5 days after you and I did our first talk, which was on March 21st,
Yes.
um, I got a message from a good girlfriend of mine from high school that our high school friend's daughter and grandson were murdered.
Wow.
5 days
Wow.
after you and I. And I remember I sent you a text and I was like, I am just blown away. We just talked about how dire these situations are. And the day after I learned about her murder,
Yes.
the next day, I learned that a woman in York County in Virginia
Yes.
was killed by her husband.
Yes.
And I believe it was a suicide, because then I believe he killed himself, homicide, suicide.
Yeah.
But, we are really in a scary time, one, for the pandemic, but also because of what people are going through. But just like the pandemic, I believe will pass.
Yes.
I believe this gives us all an opportunity to think about, how can we make this not scary? How can we make home safe and
Right.
not scary?
But
And so,
home,
like you and I,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, home is supposed to be a sanctuary, and
Right,
you should feel the safest at home. People
right,
go home to be safe, to get away
right,
from everything else. So you shouldn't go home to be in a place of fear and a place of anxiety and, feeling as if, you're waiting for the next blow to come.
right.
I wanted to go back because when you were talking about the people in relationship, it came to me because I always, as a theologian, try to figure how to incorporate God into the conversation and
Right.
let people hear something about God. And so, in that, I want to say, oftentimes we have the patriarchal teachings of Scripture that make men and women, some,
Hmm.
feel
Hmm.
as if the man has the right to be controlling over you because
Right,
now you all have this certificate, which is called a marriage license.
right,
And or either you all have committed, nowadays folks ain't even got the license, but you all have committed
right,
committed to be together, and you are
right,
dwelling in the same household. And so oftentimes people feel like, okay, well, since I am the male and looking at what scripture says, that gives me the right to be over you and to control you. And that is not what is meant by that text at all. And I
Right.
do know that, when you talk about, if you want to honor that text, I would say the best way to honor it is to, first of all, make sure the man is listening to God and is hearing from God and is honoring God. And if he's honoring God, surely he's not abusing you and
Right.
not abusing anybody else. So, when you talk about where is God in the midst of this, I cannot see, and I do know that there have been preachers, ministers, pastors, and bishops, and other people who have been abusers as well. So they don't have a pass just because they're in the pulpit preaching.
Not at all.
I do know that, God is a loving God. And if we understand God, we would not be abusing others the way that we do in society on today. And so that this is not a reflection of God. This is a reflection of somebody who does not know God. Because if you knew God, surely you would not abuse God's creation. You would value
Right.
it. And if you knew God, you would understand that, when it says that he that finds the wife finds a good thing, if you want to look at scripture. And
Right.
so who abuses a good thing? I mean, there are people, yes, who have messed up their Maseratis, they've messed up their Rolls Royces, they've messed up, but most people, if you're driving a Rolls Royce or a Bentley, you're gonna try to take as best care of that as possible. And so,
Right.
I would parallel that and say, if you have someone that you believe God has given you, you should take as best care of that person as possible, whoever that person is. And so I don't believe that those people who are abusing, can really say that they're a reflection of God, or they really have a true intimate personal relationship with God, because if they did, they would not be doing that to somebody else. And the old
Right.
folks, this, the old folks used to say, well, my dad and my mama already raised me, so you ain't got to help them. It's already done. So by the time
That's
you met
right.
me, I was already raised. So I don't need you helping at
Exactly.
all. And so,
Right.
you know, I think sometimes people with their own stuff that's going on, and their own need to release and their own need for counseling and therapy, they then take that out on the person that's in the house with them. But I would
Right.
suggest that if you have that much rage in you, if you have that much anger in you, if you have that much desire, or that great level of desire to control another person, you need to call a therapist, you need to call a psychiatrist, or you need to go down to the hospital and let them know that you're having a mental breakdown. Believe me, they'll
Right.
let you come in to the psychiatry ward, psychiatry department. Even in the midst of COVID, they know that they still got some folks who are breaking down, and they will
Right.
let you come in and be admitted. But I do think that we cannot continue on in this manner, because life is worth living. Lives are
Right.
valuable. Women are valuable, and men are valuable, because I don't want to act as if no men have been abused.
Of course.
We're all valuable. And I think that when you talk about intimate terrorism, we cannot, they used to, I'm just thinking about this. They used to say kids were terrorists. Did you ever
Yeah.
hear that? When kids
Yeah.
were little, they'd be like, oh, he's a terror. He's a terror. And so,
Right. Right.
we ought not be experiencing terror in our home during this time of unknown, of when,
Right.
what tomorrow's going to hold. First of all, we don't even know if we're still going to be here tomorrow. We never know when our name is going to be called. And so why
Right.
not make the best of the time that you have? And a part of this, Chadra, I think, is people have to sit down and have honest conversation. If
Yes.
things are not working out, let's talk about it. Okay.
Right.
So those of you who are watching today, if things are not working out and you're in a space with somebody, have a conversation with them, be honest with them, and let
Right.
them know that, hey, I feel I need to move on. And so even in the midst of COVID, when they told y'all have to stay home, tell the police officer, he pull you over, say, look, I'm going to my next home. And so, as long as you're going home, it'll be all good. Okay. So
Right.
if you have to leave
Right.
home right here where you are and go to another one, do so. But don't cause violence, and don't have acts of violence that could lead to death or injury going on in the home. This is a sanctuary, it's a safe space, and we definitely don't want to traumatize children. We don't
Right.
want to injure anyone else, and so we're asking that if you need help, call the number. There's a
Right.
suicide hotline number down there. Chadra gave us the number to the domestic violence. So if you need help, please do call one of the numbers. Chadra,
Absolutely.
what was the number again to the domestic violence hotline? What was that
Yeah, so
number?
the domestic violence hotline is 1-800-799-7233. And if you want to look it up online, it's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. The other number was the suicide hotline, and that number is, pull that up for you. That number is 1-800-273-8255. And it's, if you need to look it up online, it's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And just to piggyback on what you said, as I was saying before about valuing, if we don't teach our children to value, if we don't grow up with a sense of valuing our most precious items, or our most precious beings that are in our lives, if we don't value life itself and acknowledge that, I don't have a right, regardless of what gender I am,
Yes.
or how I show up in the world, I don't have a right to inflict my way on anybody. I don't have a right to withhold, hold someone in a space where they don't want to be.
Right.
I don't have a right to put my hands on people. I don't have a right to get in someone's face. Because when you think about domestic violence and you think about intimate terrorism, part of the things, people always think it's physical. It's not
Yes.
always physical. It
Absolutely.
could be the withholding of the use of the bathroom.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
violent. If
Yes.
someone needs to use the restroom and you are terrorizing them within their home and saying that they cannot use the restroom, they cannot eat, withholding food,
Yes.
withholding finances,
Yes.
right? All of
Yes.
these things that we take for granted, those of us who are not living in that way,
Yeah.
taking away freedoms from someone and
Yes.
imposing your way and not allowing the person to have consent and free will in the relationship and in the friendship, it's bullying.
Right.
It is a form of patriarchy that men are in control and women
Right.
should be submissive. We really need to think about the way in which globally women are treated. I always say women hold up half the sky. Women can choose to birth the nation if we choose to. We're
Right.
not obligated because you have a womb. No obligation. That's
Yes.
something that we choose to do.
Yes.
And women need to be respected, and we're not, and girls are not respected either. And so we need to teach our boys and girls to respect boys and girls. We need to
Yes.
teach our boys that women are not property. And I just want people to feel, I know with everything that's going on, it is overwhelming. All of it's overwhelming. But I really want, for those people who are in situations where they're dealing with domestic violence, I want them to know that they can get out of it and that they should have hope.
Yes.
They have to have hope. They
Yes.
cannot let go of hope. I will tell you, a couple of years ago, I was stalked on Facebook. It was terrifying. And for a while, I didn't tell people. There's shame, there's fear, you're embarrassed. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm involved in this work. How could I find myself in a situation where I am being stalked? What that said to me is that it can happen to anyone and that no one is exempt. And it doesn't matter if you're a scholar in the field or if you're a mom at home or if you're living in Guatemala or Liberia or France. It doesn't matter. It can happen to men as well as it can happen to women. So I think culturally, we need to think about the way in which we are interacting human to human. And I think if we start teaching children about respect and about integrity and about boundaries and about consent and about healthy relationships and healthy boundaries, I really think if we as a culture do that, and we really look at rape culture, all the advertising, all the ways in which women are scantily clad. I was laughing the other day. I saw something where I got banned on Facebook for a post that I did about something about breastfeeding mothers, about that we need to normalize it. And then, I was scrolling and I saw something with two women fighting. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. So that's permissible, right? The
Right.
violence that you see these videos of people fighting is okay. But to advocate for a mother feeding her child without shame in public is banned. That somehow went against the policy.
Right.
And so we need to really think about the way that we are thinking about these things. But I just want people to be hopeful. I want women who are home, who might be watching this, or if you know somebody who is being violated, as we were talking about before, reach out to that person. This is a time where a lot of people are feeling very alone, and people who are dealing with domestic violence or intimate terrorism, which is more appropriately call and check on them. If you know that you're in contact with someone, maybe do a welfare check. Have the police go. So have the police do a wellness check, thing inspirational to keep them hopeful.
Okay. And I want to say again to those who are watching to make sure that if you have any friends that because a lot of times people know,
Right.
that who have experienced any type of intimate terrorism or intimate partner violence, make sure that there's a code word that you have with them, that they call you and say that word, that that there's something going on, you need to call the police or get them some help immediately. I want to say hello, first of all, to a few people who I know who are watching. Michelle
Awesome.
Curtis,
Hey,
Apostle
Michelle.
Teresa Rose Waters Jones, Keita, Brandon Hall, Rick Hargrove, Treva Creek Morrow. That's my soror. That's our soror,
Hey.
Chadra. Myrtle Wilson, Prina God's Grace Gorham, Angela Charlie, Sandra Elam, Branford Brown, Kelia Kelvin, Andrew Collins Jr., Richard Simpson Sr. Oh, that's my brother-in-law. Okay. Freddie
Okay.
Harris, Deborah Terry, Kim Nelson, cousin, April Eccles, Sandy Hudson, Alicia Bagley, James Garrett, Delpha Mitchell, Balin Barnes, hey, from Birmingham, Charles David, Latoya Harper Parham. So thank you guys so much for listening in today. I do think
Thank
it's
you.
important for that code word though, because
Yeah.
sometimes people can't say it. And so if they call you and say
Pineapple.
pizza or
Right.
apple, yes, okay,
Right.
apple,
Right.
and you're like, what? Huh? And they may only have a minute to say apple to you. And so, if they've never talked about an apple and all of a sudden they call and said, I need an apple, then that should be the code to you to say, oh, something is going on. Let me call the police or let me get help right now for this person.
Right.
Because
Right.
you should have some person that you can trust, even if it's you should have some person that you can trust, that you can call, no, even if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and say, hey, I need an apple. And
Right.
then they automatically know that you need some help and that you're trying to save their lives. Okay. And so we have to have measures in place. We have to have conversations. We have to be honest. And once again, I understand, Shadra, also sometimes people stay together for money reasons. One person cannot afford to live on their own,
Right.
but there's always a shelter where you can go to get a start. And many of those shelters help you to then get a place. So you have to try to move through the shelter system and
Right.
allow their resources to help you to be able to move to the next chapter in your life. But what we are
Absolutely.
telling you today is you don't have to stay and be abused. There are resources available. There are people who can talk to you. There are places that you can go. And if you need help, reach out to somebody and let them know that something is going on that you need help with. Okay,
Absolutely.
Shadra, anything else that you want to share?
Well, just that, like I said, I'm glad, we're coming on and doing this call. Like I said, it breaks my heart that I'm thinking in terms of the people who are in those situations. I'm thinking in terms of my friend who lost his daughter and grandson, and all the people who are affected by domestic violence, or more appropriately, intimate terrorism. And the organization that I have is called Forever. It's the number 4 and then EVER, End Violence, End Rape, because we recognize that, globally, violence against women, well, as Kofi Annan said back in 2006, he even called it a pandemic. Kofi Annan was the Secretary General in 2006 of the United Nations, and he said that violence against women and girls is systemic. It's of pandemic proportions. He said that in 2006. And so now we're here in the midst of COVID, which is a pandemic, right? And I just, like I said, we gave you the phone numbers. Yeah, it's a pandemic. And so we need to do what we need to do. We know that 1 out of 3 women will be affected by domestic violence or intimate terrorism. We want people to feel empowered. We want people to feel hopeful and to know that they can get help and that they can get out. It's very important, like you said, about the having a safety word. It's also important that people think about a safety plan. What would that look like if something were to happen and in the middle of the night you are in dire straits and you need to be safe? Yes. Who would you call? So you need to have names of people. You need to have the number of these agencies that can help you, whether they're local agencies or the national networks. You need to have an action plan, a safety plan, so that if you need to get out, that you would be able to get out. But
that's good. That's good. I hadn't thought about that. Besides everyone watching, just having a code word where someone can help you if you are in trouble. Also have a plan. I would say, would you say this, Chadra, that person that you trust with the word, you also can give them a copy of your plan?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because, something may happen to your paper, or something may happen to wherever you wrote it down. And these are the places that you said you would like to go or consider going. You may have called and talked with them already. And now that it's time to move, you need somebody else to know your plan. And so I think that's a wonderful idea, because, your mind is going to be everywhere in the middle of the situation. So you need someone else who is calm and who can help you to think through what you initially had planned for yourself, before this moment arrives.
Absolutely.
So yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Yeah, planning ahead is essential, especially, one for yourself, but if you have children involved, that's more people to manage. So you definitely want, more people, as you said, that can help you in the midst of a very crazy situation, that can help you remain calm and actually make sure that that plan gets to, fruition, that you can get to a safe place, because you are valuable and loved. And despite your current situation, wherever you are in the world, you have a right to be here. And, if you are a faith person, I think one of the things that can be helpful is either talk to a counselor or talk to someone like Bishop Allison, talk to someone who is of faith, if that's important to you. You need to do the things that are going to help nourish your soul and help you feel strong and empowered.
Right. And also, as you're talking, I was thinking that, it's important to have plans for your kids in case something happens to you. What do you have in place in case something happens to you? One of the things I always did is make sure that I had something in writing that if anything happened to me, that my kids were to be taken care of by this particular person. And so, it's important to, if you're in a domestic situation, or as we said, intimate terrorism situation, put some things in writing, because if anything were to happen, you definitely want to make sure that your children are taken care of. have witnessed the violence. They may have even been abused themselves. But if something happens to you, the caretaker, then what is supposed to happen with them? And
Right.
so we want to make sure that we take those things into consideration. And so I think it's important that, people have a confidant that they talk to, and this person knows their wishes, knows their desires, maybe even knows where the papers are, where they
Right.
say, anything happens to me, this is what I want to happen for my kids. And let me say this on a different note, Chadra, women have always been preparing, putting money aside and getting ready to go, when things
That's
weren't
right.
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 Black women have known, women of color have been known down throughout the years and through history
That's
to
right.
have money aside. They have
Right.
money in socks, money in bras, money in drawers and
In the
everywhere.
mattress. Mm-hmm.
In the mattress, make sure that the other person didn't know where it was, didn't get it, couldn't go to a bank account and get it. And they had money stored outside in the dirt and underground and some everywhere. And so
Exactly.
women when they get ready to make a move, usually they are prepared. So what we're saying is, if you are being abused and if you desire to make a move, please prepare yourself by first talking with someone, putting some things in writing in case anything happens to you, but also having a confidant that you share your code word with, but you also share your plan with, so that they can help you to implement if anything happens that may try to hinder you from being able to move as you had planned. And so I think the numbers are important. Domestic violence hotline number is very important. Also, those who feel suicidal, please do call that suicide hotline. We do know that in the midst of this COVID, there are a lot of emotions and feelings that are way up in the air. People are,
Right.
feeling lots of stuff, and that's to be expected. So there's absolutely
Right.
nothing wrong with you. You are right with many people across the world today. But there is help. A lot of people are doing telehealth. You can even call our center at
Right.
202-655-2255. We have therapists that can talk to you at EJC Wellness Center. Because reality is we don't know when this is going to end. And so we don't know how long you may be locked or closed in a certain space, because we don't know how long the stay-at-home order is going to be in force.
Right.
You can only predict, hey, y'all got 2 more weeks, but they might
Right.
come back and say it might be 3. And so, if you need to talk to somebody, please do. Once again, EJC Wellness Center is 202-655-2255. We do have therapists that can talk with you, and we do accept most insurances. And if you are feeling any of those symptoms, if you're in the DMV area, if you're feeling any of the symptoms of COVID-19, please do go have a talk with your doctor, and then go to one of the centers. They now have a center in Silver Spring, a drive-through center where you can go and be tested there. And they have another center in Bethesda where you can drive through and be tested there. And so if you're in the state of Maryland, you can go to either one of those. And I'm sure if you're in DC, you can go to those as well. And so
Right.
we don't want you to be home and have all the symptoms: fever, coughing, shortness of breath. Some people actually experience coughing up blood. We don't want you to have all those symptoms and not be checked out. Okay. So during this
Right.
COVID-19, we do realize that the stay at home has caused the domestic violence or intimate terrorism numbers to increase. And we are praying for your
Right.
safety. We are praying that you would stay protected. And if you are not, that you could make the best decision for you.
Absolutely.
And so we want to come on and talk about
Right.
it on today and see what we could do to help you. But it's documented. The numbers are increasing
Right.
as people are being forced to stay at home and forced to stay in the same space and forced to deal with each other versus being able to go to all of the outlets that they're able to go to every day and
Right.
even on the weekends. So I suggest, Bishop Abrams is suggesting, you talk about what you are feeling versus taking it out on the other person. It's so
Absolutely.
easy to just raise your hand, throw something, push somebody. It's easier to do that than it is to express your feelings. But I'm asking you today to talk about it, to communicate, and if you need to have a code word, establish that with somebody else, and make sure that they have your plan in place, and make sure that you have something in writing that if you have children that says what you want to happen with your children in case anything happens to you.
Yeah.
Okay, cousin Shadra, any last words, cousin?
Well, I would just say, once again, thank you for, organizing this call, because I think it's important that we have these conversations around domestic violence, or as we're calling it, or as they called it in the New York Times
Intimate
article, right?
terrorism, I got
Human
it.
terrorism. Yeah. I mean, I think that's more appropriate, and it's more encompassing of everybody. And it
Yeah,
doesn't matter if you're in a house, or if you're a girlfriend, or whether or not it's same gender or heterosexual. None of that matters. Violence does not discriminate.
yeah.
What I would say, the one thing that we talked about last time that I just want to just touch on really quickly is that we have the national organizations that could be of support to you. We can definitely have code words and have people that that are in your corner in case you were in a dire situation. You can reach out to them. Having your action plan in case you need to escape, like think about those things, but also reach out to the organizations that are in your communities. If you are unfamiliar with the domestic violence agencies that are in your community, or people who are doing work around DV, look into that. I have a sister, Sadia White, who is doing generational survivors. She works with people who are survivors of domestic violence and other forms of violence. There's Transitions, which is in Hampton, Virginia, which is a place that helps to find housing for women, and safe houses, safe homes for the children and the women who are escaping. So I just want people to just feel hopeful. I know it's a really daunting time right now. People are stressed, but you have to maintain control of yourself. You have to remember, if you are the person who is in a situation where you're dealing with someone that is violent, you have to remember, one, it's not your fault. You don't
Yes,
deserve it.
yes,
And that you have a right to be free and to live your life and to be in a safe place. You don't
yes,
deserve this. And
yes,
so reach out to local organizations, call the police if you need to, call your contact person, say that safe word, and get the help that you need, and you're going to get through it.
yes, yes. And
I'm
you just
hopeful and prayerful that you will.
you reminded me to say that also, if you're in the DC area and you are a victim of violence, Empowerment Justice Center has a victims program, and we want you to call our number.
Wonderful.
Yes, I'm going to type it up here, 202 So if you have been a victim of violence, we're able to help you with resources with being a victim, as well as we have therapy for persons on our EJC Wellness Center side if you
Right.
are open to therapy. But there is help for you. There is hope for you. And in this COVID-19, we will get through it, but we are all in this together. And just know that you're not alone. And once
Not
again, I
alone.
think we had a few other people who hopped on. We want to give a shout out to Charlene Dexter, Ashley, Deb Dunn, Kenneth Jones, Deacon Kim Hall, and Minister Catherine McKay and Page. And so once again, thank you, cousin. Once again, those
Cousin.
who just got on, this is my cousin Chadra from New York, and she is by way of Virginia. Chadra, before you go, you have to tell people, I know it's going to be postponed, but you have to tell people about the Sankofa celebration that happens in Virginia every year. The people all enjoy that. And so tell them about that, and then we have to get off.
Okay, so the Sankofa Projects annually host a remembrance ceremony in honor of our ancestors who perished in the Middle Passage. In 2019, the world acknowledged the beginning of slavery, which happened at Point Comfort in Hampton, Virginia. And on that ship, the White Lion, 20 and odd Africans disembarked in Hampton, Virginia, and that was the beginning of racialized, terrorized chattel slavery in America. What people often don't talk about are the ones who we lost along the way. So during the Middle Passage or the transatlantic enslavement trade, millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of Africans, some estimate as many as 100 million Africans, died en route to the different parts of the world. And people think America, not only America, the Caribbean, Brazil, Europe. So the ceremony that my organization does is called the Sankofa Projects. We're an educational, cultural, social justice organization, and we do an annual ceremony. This year would have been our 9th year doing remembrance. Because of COVID, we are going to do a virtual ceremony.
Nice.
Because we decided to do that. We're a part of an international coalition of remembrance ceremonies. The remembrance ceremonies happen all over the world, and we have decided collectively, we didn't want to postpone because this is honoring our ancestors, and we need to honor them and respect them. And so we're going to honor them, but we're going to be safe in the safety of our own homes, and we will have some kind of virtual experience for them. And so, remembrance, as I said, honors the Africans that perished. Many Africans were thrown into the Atlantic Ocean. Many jumped, resisting their life of enslavement. And so those are the ancestors. Those are the ones that do not get the recognition. Their names are not in the history books. We will never know their names. And really, we don't know if we're connected to them.
I was thinking that.
I tell people all the time, I claim them all. So I don't necessarily need to figure out where from. I claim all of the continent, and I claim every soul that was lost in that ocean. So hopefully next year, 2021, we will be able to have the physical, in-person remembrance where we're on the beach at Buckrow Beach. But this year it will be virtual. I'll send you information so that way you can share that with your community as well.
Yes, thank you. Because we do want to honor those, whose names we don't know. Because I'm always amazed, and I'm not un-American. I'm not non-patriotic. But we have the tomb of the unknown soldier, and so we honor that person. So why can't we honor those slaves who jumped because they refused to come and be in enslavement, and those who died in transport? And so some of those surely were our relatives, but why not honor those and remember those people? Because those are our people. Whether we ever got to know them or not, they're still our people, and they're still our ancestors, and I do believe that we should honor them. And so thank you all for all that you do, Chadra, with Forever and with the Sankofa Project. And let us know, because we want to join you virtually when you honor those ancestors and, collectively call out, them as ancestors to us who are here today. Absolutely. And so thank you again for getting on talking about domestic violence, or let me say intimate terrorism. Yes. And thank you for your passion, your activism, all that you do to fight for the rights of our people and to bring awareness to some of the things that are happening that should not be. And so thank you so much. And we love you. So glad to have you as a family member. And, we will get back on and give an update probably in 2 more weeks about where the numbers are with domestic violence. And, just do a check-in with people to remind them that there is help, there is hope. And, to give them those again, and to maybe reach somebody that we did not reach before. Okay. Absolutely. So blessings to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
everybody for watching, and we will talk to you again.